I'm Richard Wise, and I'm the composer of the music for the questions. Sure, I think one of the main themes of the work is about the story that most people have to experience at some stage in their lives, of moving from a position in which they have to figure out their isolation in this world, but additionally how they make their way towards intimacy and connection. And there's this developmental phase that's all about the oscillation between intimacy and isolation that I really tried to capture musically. And so to represent intimacy and vulnerability in that position that the characters are really working to get towards but accidentally holding themselves back from through their psychologies, I often used quite melodic, sweet type musical devices to show that their heart was on the line in those moments. And when they're isolated and when they're causing their own isolation, there's sort of a musical framework around that too that has quite a bit more of a chaotic or a disjointed nature to it, like, you know, two connection points not quite meeting with each other. And it was in that way that I hoped to kind of represent that journey on that story that they were living out together. I really hope they recognise themselves in that journey that the characters are going on, because that is a universal developmental achievement, to be able to figure out how to be who you actually are vulnerably with somebody, which is the condition of real intimacy taking place. And I think we've all walked that road at some stage in our lives. Some of us are still walking that road, and some of us are still trying to figure that out. And even though it's a developmental phase that has some clear sort of temporal boundaries around it, I don't think it ever really ends for people. I think we're constantly on a journey to try to orient ourselves to intimacy, and, you know, to do that, to be able to be vulnerable with each other. It's a really hard thing to do, and I don't think anybody escapes that. I don't think anybody finds an easy path to that. I think it's always hard won. And so I think the audience will identify that journey because they've been through it. I started out writing the music on manuscript because I really wanted there to be some central themes and, you know, melodic devices that were kind of carved out a little bit. So I was using paper and pencil and working on little, you know, motifs and melodic kind of elements. And when I had enough of those, I moved to the computer. I used a digital audio workstation and my piano together and built tracks like that. And then I sent those tracks to Van, and Van would compose lyrics for those, and then we'd back and forth them a little bit. So the process was quite iterative and quite collaborative with Van. At the start of writing, I was listening to a lot of Tim Minchin, particularly Matilda, which I think is just brilliant, and kind of wondering how in God's name anyone could write anything that good, generally. At the time, I was also listening to a lot of cinematic music and a lot of neoclassical music, and quite a bit of sort of indie folk kind of material as well. And I think you can certainly hear all of those influences in the music that was eventually produced for the show.